Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening in from today. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Onwards and Upwards, which is where you learn everything that you need to know about living and working in the United States as a global healthcare worker. So today is our immigration Q&A. We are joined by an expert panel. I'm sure many of you have many questions, and we will do our very best to get to as many of them as we can today. So please pop your questions into the chat. And as soon as our expert panel comes out here shortly, we will start with that immigration Q&A and get as many of your questions answered as possible. So as you know, AMN Healthcare International is the only organization that offers both direct and staffing opportunities. So again, the only organization that offers both direct and staffing opportunities. So we have opportunities all over the United States. So if you have not already, please make sure that you get your application into us, amnhealthcare.com/international. Our team of expert recruiters are on hand to assist you in any way that we can, whatever your preference is. If you are looking for direct or staffing, just like I said, we've got many opportunities for you. So don't delay. We're going to get into our immigration Q&A here very shortly, but don't let the news delay you from getting your application in and starting your I-140 process. What's going to happen is going to happen. So that is what you can control. So make sure that you're getting your application in today. And without further ado, I am going to ask our expert panel to join me. They need no introduction. I'm sure that many of you have met these amazing individuals before. So we are joined today by Mike Hammond and Chris Mazzillo, who are going to answer any questions that you may have about the Visa Bulletin that came out just last week. So I am going to start with Mike, and we've got participation from all over the globe here. I see Poland, Philippines, Saudi Arabia, London. So thank you so much for participating today. But I know that you are here to not talk to me, but talk to the experts. So I am going to start by asking Mike. We had a couple of questions come through to us previously. And then, of course, I see just many questions here. So Prince has asked, do you think the upcoming Visa Bulletin can cover December 2022 priority date, Mike?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we don't have any idea for sure what the October Bulletin is going to say. Traditionally, the October Bulletin does jump forward. The furthest we got last year in this year's bulletin was November 22nd, 2022. So I've been making the same prediction for the last couple months on this show, that I think we're going to get to January. It's been tongue-in-cheek, and whether it's real or not, it's anybody's guess. But to answer Prince's question specifically, I would bet on it, Prince, but I wouldn't bet a lot. Maybe like, I don't know, a quarter, 50 cents, something. So, but I do believe it will.
And I know that everybody wants those absolutes, but that's just not possible, right? So we don't know what's going to happen. And of course, these are experts in the field and give very valid opinions. But at the end of the day, nobody has a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. But we hope that it will go the path that Mike has said. So Chris, we had a question here. My I-140 has not been approved since November of 2023. Does retrogression affect I-140 approvals?
No. Retrogression does not impact the approvability or the timeline of the I-140. It's completely independent. You will want to check with your attorney or your sponsor to see if that's within normal processing times for the type of case that was filed. It seems long, but then again, the U.S. government tends to have quite a bit of variance in the processing of I-140s. course, if anyone's urgent, you could upgrade the case to premium processing. Having said that, assuming you're an EB3 national, as Mike said, if we guess, and it's surely a guess, that the priority date in the October Visa Bulletin will be something like January of 2023 and you're November of 2023, that's an 11-month gap. And so there's probably no real reason to upgrade premium processing unless you just want to do it for peace of mind.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. A couple of questions coming in. Should I wait to start my process until the October Visa Bulletin comes out? Is there any reason why anybody here should delay starting their process and wait for that October Visa Bulletin?
I would say definitely not, because the sooner you get your process started and the sooner you get filed, the sooner you establish a priority date, which puts you in the queue, it puts you in the line. So the October Bulletin isn't going to change that. It's going to give you some idea as to how long your line is and how long the wait is. But if you're not in the line, then how long it is pretty irrelevant. As we've said on these calls many times, when we're dealing in a climate of retrogression, you can only do those things you can control, whether it's taking your English test, passing that, staying in a bedside role, all the things you can control. And one of them is getting in the process and getting filed. And those are what you should focus on. The retrogression will, to some degree, take care of itself and is all out of all of our control anyway.
Thank you so much. And that's exactly what we say all the time. Get your place in line. Don't wait. That is what you can control. And there are things that you can do during retrogression to keep yourself motivated, like take that necessary English exam, etc. So there are things that you can do to keep yourself motivated during this time. But as Mike said, don't delay. There's absolutely no reason why you should wait for the October Visa Bulletin to start your process. So there are many questions coming in, Chris, about, well, why did this happen? Why are we retrogressed right now? So can you give a very high level as to what happens, and that it wasn't unexpected, but lots of questions coming in about why.
Yes, no, sure. Happy to do it, Deirdre. So the reason for retrogression is because the U.S. immigration system has a quota. And so there are the U.S. CIS and the Department of State are only allowed to approve 140,000 employment-based visas every year. And so the U.S. CIS and Department of State have more than 140,000 petitions in their queue, in their pipeline. And so as a result of that, U.S. immigration law requires that the services prioritize the oldest cases so long as no one countries are using up too many of the visas. And so if you look at the Visa Bulletin, you'll see there are a list of countries down the y-axis and, a list of categories, EB 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 down the y-axis, and a list of countries across the top, the x-axis. And so the purpose of the Visa Bulletin is to tell the State Department how to allocate those 140,000 visas. But essentially that's why retrogression happens in the most general sense, specifically why we always see retrogression appear to be much worse in August and September of every year. The U.S. calendar year is, of course, January to December, but the U.S. fiscal year runs from October 1st through September 30th. And so what the U.S. government is trying to do is use all 140,000 visas from September 1 from October 1 all the way into September 30th. And so as they get closer to September 30th, they are using the 138,000 and the 139,000, and they're getting very close right now to using the 140,000th visa. And so as they get closer, there's fewer numbers left, few visas in the supply left. And so what happens is the U.S. government prioritizes the oldest cases, which in this case are the cases that are about 4 or 5 years old, and even older than that for Chinese and Indian born immigrant applicants. And so what they're doing, the U.S. government's doing, is they're prioritizing the very old cases. That's the bad news. The good news is come October, we should see that date jump forward. A little earlier, Mike speculated something like the end of 2022, early 2023, which I would agree with him. So that sounds about the right target, what we would expect. We'll know for sure in about the second week of September.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And as soon as that visa bulletin comes out, the very next day, we will be doing a show like this to address any questions that you have. So Mike, we have a question from Ediola. Her priority date is March of 2023, but she does have a tourist visa. So what is the implication, if any, of going for a visit here to the United States?
Technically, you can visit the U.S. As a tourist, even though you have an I-140 approved. However, you are going to have to explain at the port of entry, the border, wherever if you're flying in or you're driving in from Canada or wherever, that your intention for this visit, this tourist visa, is in fact a temporary visit, because an I-140 demonstrates immigrant intent. I intend to immigrate to the U.S. and live here as a green card holder, whereas coming as a visitor indicates non-immigrant intent. I intend to come here for a short period of time. So if you have a very specific schedule, I'm coming in for a wedding, I'm coming in for my sister's kid's graduation, all those kinds of things, and you're here for a short period of time, I think you will you'll have no trouble entering. If, however, they believe at the border that you're intending to simply come as a visitor and then wait for 6 months and hopefully your priority date becomes current and then maybe adjust, they can turn you back at the border. So you want to be very careful and be very prepared that could happen. And that potentially, depending on what you tell them or what they believe that you're saying, if they believe there's been a misrepresentation made, that can then impact your immigrant visa. But again, if you've got something very specific coming in for a short period of time, I think you're fine.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. Hope that answers your question. We have a question about, and Chris, I will give this one over to you, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask since Jonah asked it anyway. If she's self-sponsored NCLEX and IELTS, can we escape retrogression with a direct hire hospital with premium processing?
No, retrogression is for all immigrants, applicants coming into the United States, whether that's direct processing or staffing company. It doesn't matter. You just need to choose the right employment situation here in America for you.
Thank you so much. I knew the answer, but since we had a question, let's ask it.
I think Deirdre froze up there, Mike.
Okay, so how about if we just run through questions while she unfreezes? So I had someone earlier post a question about a degree and a diploma in medical technology, more than 12 years of experience. They have a visa screen from CGNFNS as a medical lab technician. Want to know about applying for an H-1B. So a medical lab technician is not an H-1B level job. However, a medical lab technologist is an H-1B level job. So you'd have to determine whether your education is sufficient to get the medical technologist ASCP, or if you're going to a state where there is a license. There, I believe, are 12 states that require licenses of medical technologists, depending on which one you're going to. And you would need a visa screen from CGNFNS, so with a medical technologist. Since you've already worked with CGNFNS, I'd probably start there and see if you are can meet the visa screen standards for a medical technologist. If you do, then you likely are going to meet the state licensure requirements. Not 100% back and forth, but I'm going to say likely, and then you would be comfortable in saying I'm eligible for an H-1B.
Yeah, no, totally correct. And I don't know about you, Mike, but we've certainly seen a lot of medical lab technologists apply and come into the United States in the last couple of years. I would say, at least at our firm, nursing is probably the number one occupation, but MLTs are probably number two for what we're seeing in amongst U.S. employers.
Makes sense.
All right, I'm back. This is the beauty of live shows. So Mr. Internet was not quite cooperating with me there for a moment. So I apologize. But hey, nothing like keeping us on our toes, right? So Chris, we were in the middle. I know you were answering that question. You may have answered it already, but if one of our applicants has her husband has a school opportunity here in the US, can she come to the US while waiting for her I-140 approval?
So yes is the answer, but there's a little subtlety to it. So let's talk it through. So if you have an I-140 pending for the United States, that means that you are seeking a U.S. green card to come to the United States or permanent residency. And those terms, by the way, are synonymous. If Mike and I may use the term green card, we may use the term permanent residency. We may even specifically use the term immigrant. And those three terms are synonymous. Now, the question talks about, what if I have an immigrant visa pending, but my spouse is seeking to attend college in the United States? Now, in most instances, when someone attends college in the United States, they do not do it via a green card. Instead, their immigration status is something called an F1 temporary visa. So that's F like Frank, F1 temporary visa. And that visa is capless. There's no quota on the student visa, so that's very good. But the student is very limited into the behavior that they can engage in. Broadly speaking, they are only allowed to attend classes at the university who sponsored their student visa. Again, there's some exceptions, and after a period of time, they can sometimes get some very specific work authorization, but we're trying to keep this general. So broadly speaking, the spouse would enter the United States on an F1 student visa. Now, as with almost all categories in the United States, if an individual is eligible for a temporary visa, their spouse and under 21-year-old children are often eligible to trail them. In other words, they're what we call derivative beneficiaries, and they are able to come to the United States at the same time or any time after that the principal beneficiary, the F1 student, enters the United States. Now, the challenge, though, and so what the nurse could do in this hypothetical is she could get an F2 derivative temporary student visa to enter the United States. The one tricky part with this is because she has a green card pending, the U.S. embassy official, when she goes to get her F2 visa, could say, you have a green card pending, and therefore you have something called immigration intent. And what that means is you have expressed to the U.S. immigration authorities, by the fact that you have the green card pending, that you intend to permanently reside in the United States, which is inconsistent with the idea of a temporary student visa. This is very often, but not always, a manageable situation, but it's very nuanced. And so what I would recommend you do is that you connect with your green card attorney, and she or he can walk you through specifically a way that we might be able to successfully get you the student visa where you can come here for a while, but you still a year or two from now would go to your overseas U.S. embassy in order to have your green card appointment. What you should not expect to do is come here on your student visa and ultimately just stay here until your green card is ready. While that can happen in some exceptions, for the most part, you should assume that's not going to happen to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. So Mike, we have a question here. My I-140 petition was received on the 15th of September, 2023, and still not received my approval. But I know that people behind me in the process have received theirs. What is the way forward for me?
Well, a couple things. The processing of I-140s that are not filed as premium is dependent upon the service center that your I-140 is at. So you'd want to check with your sponsor, your case manager, or attorney and find out what service center you're at. You can tell sometimes if you've been given a copy of your receipt notice, you can tell from there. And you can go to the USCIS website and determine what is normal processing for that service center. Companies don't have a choice as to where to file cases, so you can't always pick the fastest service center. It's based upon geography, and then the USCIS will often transfer cases from one service center to another. So your processing may be out of line, it may not be. So that'd be the first thing I would look at. The second thing I would look at is, has there been a request for evidence? There are often requests for evidence issued in cases, and if so, that will slow down the case. Requests for evidence should not necessarily be viewed as something negative. They happen all the time. The most common one we see is if you filed a case last September of 2023, the hospital that was sponsoring you may have had 2021 tax returns because their 2022 would not have been filed yet. And so by the time the government's looking at your case now in August of 2024, 2021 looks really old, and they'll send a request for evidence saying, we need updated financials, and it'll be a pretty simple thing. But you may have something like that happening in your case. And then, as Chris mentioned earlier, you can always premium process your case. However, since your priority date of September 2023 is not current and is not likely to be current in the near future, maybe even all of next year, there's probably no benefit to upgrading to premium other than peace of mind. I feel better.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that question. Chris, we have a question from Musa. It's a lengthy question, so I'm going to try my best to summarize as best I can. His priority date is November 23rd, 2022, and his wife is currently pregnant with a due date of April 25th, 2025. Congratulations, Musa. So if the baby is not born prior to having her in the US, what's the process of having the newborn added to the application, and will it affect their DQ date?
So that let's start with a few basics, Deirdre. You're right that there's a lot to that. So the first is, if by some chance you become current, your priority date becomes current, and you and your spouse are able to enter the United States before the birth of the baby, and congratulations, by the way, that's very exciting. But if you're able to enter the United States before April, and presumably even a few months before that, because I'm sure your spouse probably shouldn't be traveling as she gets closer and closer to the birthday. But so just for argument's sake, if you become current and you're able in the United States maybe in January of this year, then the baby would be born in America, which actually will make the baby eligible for U.S. citizenship immediately. So that's exciting news. Your child could become a U.S. citizen essentially upon birth. So that's one thing. Two, if the baby is born, if you have your green card appointment later in the year, let's pretend your green card appointment is, I don't know, next October, so the baby's been born for a few months, then it's normally not very difficult to add the new child to the process. But each embassy is a little different. So you'll want to check the embassy's website into specifically how you add a newborn child.
Thank you so much. I'm actually going to take this one from Sammy. Sammy, you're in a contract with OGP. Is that your priority date is May 2023? Is it okay to go abroad and work, for example, in Dubai? Yes, absolutely. Just check with your recruiter and make sure that you're having a conversation so that we can update your file. But for the most part, going to the Middle East to get that experience is not going to be an issue at all. So hope that answers your question. So Mike, we have a question about how long does it take NVC to move a case from one country to another?
Well, first of all, generally, we do not encourage people to change the location of their interviews. So if you were originally planning on having your interview in Manila and you've taken an assignment in Dubai and you're like, can I move my interview, or my friend got processed faster, can I do that? We normally do not encourage that. There are times when moving embassies is necessary. Maybe your assignment ended in Dubai and you're never going back there, and that's where you originally were. And so now you've got to go back to Manila. So sometimes you have to. The processing time, I would say, often they go awry as far as getting things moved. And so often a pretty significant delay. But this is one of those things that you could have one that could go very smoothly, and 3 months later, you could be fine. And then you could have another one that you're still communicating with NVC and we're still following up with the consulate 8 months later. So it's a pretty big range. But again, do not do it lightly. Do not do it without talking to your account manager. Do not email the NVC directly to start it. Make sure you've talked to your attorney or account manager before you take any type of action like that.
Thank you so much, Mike. So Chris, we have a question here from Enoch. Priority date is April 21st, 2024. And this is a passport question. Only have 1.5 pages of his passport. He'll have to do another one before his priority date has been reached. A new passport number can a new passport number impact the process with the old number in case that he does another passport? So I think what he's asking is, if his application is in an old passport number, will a new passport number affect it in any way?
Yeah, so basically no is the answer. He doesn't need to worry about that. I would recommend probably getting a new passport. His priority date is April of 2024. So the unfortunate reality is he's probably looking at, at least a year, probably much more likely 2 years before he actually even has his visa appointment, his immigrant visa interview. So that should give him plenty of time to apply for a new passport. And then when he goes to the embassy interview, he should take both passports with him. The old passport that would then be canceled, that only has 1.5 pages left in it, and then the new fresh passport.
Thank you so much. So Mike, there's a few questions coming in here. If I have applied for an EB3, can I switch to an H1B to avoid this retrogression?
I think it depends on the occupation you're in. First of all, we had a question earlier about medical technologist, and Chris talked about that's an occupation that he sees a lot here in the U.S. There's other allieds like OTs, PTs, where H1s are readily available. H1s are not readily available for RNs. The vast majority of RNs in the U.S., the positions do not qualify for an H1B. So it is difficult, not even possible for most RNs to get an H1B. But in the event that you are eligible for an H1B, there is nothing that is problematic with having an H1B and an EB3 case. Now, the EB3 cases are generally not set up as H1B level cases. So you may have to do a new I-140 when you come into the U.S. as an H-1B RN. But it is possible. They're just not very many.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we've lots of questions coming in, and I know we asked this question at the top of the show, but maybe some participants weren't on at that time. So I'll ask it again, and I'll throw it out to either Chris or Mike. What are your predictions for the October Visa Bulletin? I know we already discussed it, but I think we had some attendees join a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Mike. I think it'll be something around January 1st, 2023, maybe a month or two earlier than that, going back as far as October or November 2022, maybe Jan or Feb 2023. I think it'll be somewhere in that range.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, lots of questions about the predictions. And so hopefully that helps you there. So a question on recapturing priority dates. Do you need to wait for your new I-140 application to be approved before you can recapture the old priority date? Mike?
Yeah, so when you're talking about recapturing a priority date, what that means is that you have an I-140 that's previously been approved by through a prior employer, and you're no longer pursuing residency through that employer. For a I-140 priority date to remain valid for potential recapture use, it needs to have been approved for more than 6 months or not withdrawn within that 6-month period of time. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing, and it needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. It needs to have been based upon a legitimate filing. If there was any what they call fraud or misrepresentation in the prior filing, it can also not be recaptured. The process of recapturing is done with your new I-140. So when you file a new I-140 for, say, one of the AMN Kinetics direct hire hospitals, when they file that petition for XYZ hospital, they will include a copy of your prior I-140 approval notice or whatever documentation you have that shows a prior I-140 approved. And then when that new approval notice is issued, it will have the old priority date on it. So that is the process of recapturing. So it is done with your new I-140 process.
Thank you so much, Mike. So hopefully that helps you. Chris, we have a question from Janelle. We had a family petition around 15 years ago resulting in denial. Will that affect my EB3 application?
Almost surely no. Having said that, it would depend on the reason for the denial. And what you definitely should do is get a copy of that denial to your attorney so that they can make sure they disclose that denial in your I-140 petition. In fact, it's that lack of disclosure, the lack of listing the denial on your I-140 EB3 petition that often causes more problems than the actual denial itself, especially when it's 15 years old. So key thing, get that copy of the denial to your immigration attorney. My guess is it probably will not be a problem, but they do need to make sure that they have disclosed that in your EB3 application.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Mike Hema has a question. How long does she have to wait for an interview after becoming DQ'd? CX status at NVC is more than 1 year, and it's so frustrating. Sorry, Hema, but hopefully Mike would be able to give you some advice. Okay,
well, a couple of things. First of all, you have to have a current priority date to get an interview. And you're talking about a family-based case. I do not know off the top of my head what family-based, the family 2A category, what the dates are. So I don't know if your priority date's current or not. But number one, you have to have your priority date that's current. Number two, you obviously have to be DQ'd. And then how long it will take will depend upon the embassy you're at. Some embassies have interviews very quickly with people who have priority dates current and are DQ'd. Other embassies, there can be a significant delay. Some embassies have almost like self-serve, where you schedule your own appointments. And then you can also look for earlier cancellations, and sometimes you can get lucky and have an earlier thing. But the key is your priority date. And I just honestly do not know what the F2A category priority dates are at. So sorry.
Thanks, Mike.
F2A priority date for all other countries is November of 2021, Mike.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I didn't know that, by the way. I'm looking that up. Just
okay. I was going to say, that's brilliant, man.
It's like tag teaming here. It's like tag teaming.
I forgot my birthday the other day. So believe me, I don't know what the F2A priority date is.
Oh, my goodness. I stopped tracking birthdays after a certain age, so they're not fun anymore after a certain age. So Chris, we have a question here. If my priority date is July 2023, would you advise premium processing? I know we touched on this earlier as well. I believe Mike touched on it, but want to ask just in case we had some late attendees.
I mean, the answer is probably not. And the main reason is because it's incredibly expensive. It's $2,800, $2,800, which for almost all people is an extraordinary amount of money. For all employers, and it's an extraordinary amount of money. Your priority date doesn't sound like it's current. Now, if by some chance the October Visa Bulletin comes out and you are current, or maybe only a month or two from being current, then maybe it would be worth spending that money. But I'm not sure I would do that today. At the very least, I would wait until the October Visa Bulletin is published.
Great. Thank you, Chris. And a follow-up to the question that we had on the denial. Genevieve wants to know, how can one get a copy of the denial if you currently do not have it?
Yeah, the government has what's called a FOIA process, a Freedom of Information Act request, where you can submit a request online. You have to demonstrate that you're entitled to that information. So as a beneficiary of that petition, you may be entitled to parts of it. If you get whoever was doing the petitioning, they would probably be entitled to more of it. If you used an attorney, even if it's 15 years ago, the attorney may have retained a copy of it. But if you didn't use an attorney or they don't have a copy from 15 years ago, do a FOIA request and they will provide you. Sometimes the information some of it will be redacted, but usually you get enough to know what happened.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So Sherry has a question about her son aging out. So Sherry has been DQ'd since last year. Her child is going to age out in November. She was told that his age would automatically freeze. Is this true, or will she have to contact NVC on her behalf? So I'm assuming she's with AMN Healthcare International. So Chris, I'll give that question to you.
Yeah. So let me start with sounds like it's a very close call. So Sherry should absolutely contact AMN and whatever attorney is working on that, and let them specifically make sure they're aware of the child who's turning 21 in November. There is some instance where the date of the child does freeze, so that may be true. I'd need to know the specifics of the case, which is why you should definitely contact someone. The last piece is while the DQ is important, what's of course really important is the priority date. So for all of those reasons, there may be a possibility that some of the age is frozen, but you will need to talk to the attorney to get the specifics of the case.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. So Mike, Mary D is asking, how long is it taking on average for an I-140 approval receipt? She sent hers in June 2024, and thank you so much for this session.
Oh, well, thanks for attending there, Mary D. Average processing time on a regular case, I would say we're probably looking at 7-8 months is average. But there's a couple of the service centers or some are getting transferred to that seem to be longer than that. But I would say that's what we're seeing on average.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Hussein has a question. When my priority date is within the period published, what is my next step? Chris.
Yeah, so if you're documentary qualified, you should be getting an appointment interview from the embassy that you've asked to be interviewed at. So that's great news. You should hopefully have an interview shortly, and that would be great news. You'll be coming to the United States very quickly then.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So Mark had a question, and I think many may have this question as well. Mike, can you define what a priority date is, and what does DQ mean?
Okay. Well, a priority date is just a term we use to mean your spot in the line. So if you are a nurse, you start your immigration process with something called the filing of an I-140. And the day that I-140 is filed, so the day it's received by the USCIS, they assign you a priority date. If you're an allied, and you go through something called PERM first, and the day your PERM application is filed is your priority date. But think of it just as your spot in the queue. That's your spot in line, and it's based upon a date. A DQ, I'm a big fan of Dairy Queen, and so I still think of DQ to mean Dairy Queen all the time. But in this context, for this call, a DQ means documentarily qualified. And it is when your case is at the National Visa Center, the NVC, which the NVC is, think of the NVC as like the back office of the consulates. So the back office of the consulate handles things like the security paperwork and not your medical exams, I'm sorry, your birth records and divorce records and marriage records and criminal stuff and things of that nature. So they're the back office. When they've gotten everything they need from you, all the birth records, et cetera, they will DQ you, which means that the embassy, the front end of the process, the consulate, is now permitted to do the final step, which is the interview. So that's what those terms mean.
And I can tell you that Mike does really like DQ. I've been to several DQs with him.
Yep.
Dairy Queens.
That is a good place. Dairy Queen is good. Very. So Mohammed, I know that we've talked a lot about what our panel of experts can predict with the next Visa Bulletin, and we've given a lot of information on that. So thanks for your question. But I want to be very, very respectful of both Chris and Mike's time. And so do you have any last words of advice before we meet again next month when the October Visa Bulletin comes out and we'll know what's going to happen at the top of the fiscal year? Mike, any words of advice for our listeners before I let you go?
I would just say stay the course. Retrogression can look negative, particularly if you're looking, say, at the September Bulletin, which, as Chris explained earlier, is depressing but not surprising. And really has no relevance whatsoever to what you're doing. But just stay the course, focus on those things you can focus on, and it's just going to be a matter of time.
Thanks, Mike. Chris, any last words of advice before we meet again next month?
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on what Mike's saying, kind of focus on what you can control. You can control your NCLEX, your English language passing, finding a good employer, getting your I-140 approved. And while we would all like to see the Visa Bulletin be very favorable, if it's not favorable, I assure you, Mike and I have been doing this for a combined 1,000 years or something. People do move through the process, and you'll be surprised how quick your priority date will ultimately become current.
Thank you both so much for your expertise, for answering our many questions. I know we didn't get to every question today, but we will be on again next month when the October Visa Bulletin comes out, hopefully joined by Chris and Mike, and to get your questions answered. But I know I speak for everybody on the show today. We appreciate your time very, very much. We love having you both on these shows, and I know that your expertise is greatly appreciated by our many nurses and medical technologists tuning in from all around the world. So thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great weekend and look forward to speaking to you both soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay, so I know that there was a lot of questions. Hope that you got a lot of great information from Chris and Mike today. Couple of takeaways that you wanted is that it was not surprising. There are still many things that are in your control. So focus on what you can control. So your NCLEX, your English, getting your I-140 filed, all of that is in your control. And we'll be back on again next month to talk about what happens in the October Visa Bulletin, but stay positive and stay on your course. That's what Mike said, is continue on your path. That's going to be very, very important. There's a couple of questions in the chat that I do want to address. And what happens if my employer abandons, right? So in the unfortunate event that that does happen, choosing a staffing opportunity may be a really good option for you. Because again, in the unfortunate event that your job offer is rescinded, then by choosing a staffing opportunity, then that I-140 is moved to another opportunity. So AMN Healthcare International will find you another opportunity and your I-140 processing continues. So in the unfortunate event that that does happen, then staffing opportunities may be a really, really good option for you. And here at AMN Healthcare International, we do both. So if you have not already, make sure that you are getting your application in today. Again, going back to what Chris and Mike had shared with us, don't delay. Just do not delay. Don't wait until the October Visa Bulletin. You heard that from Mike today as well, is get your application in today, amnhealthcare.com/international, and let us help get you started. So that's what's going to establish that all-important priority date, and Mike explained what that was. So hopefully you got a lot of great information, and we are going to now hand it over to Holly for one of our favorite segments on the show, our Clinical Corner. So I'm going to hand it over to Holly.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you again. Thanks for joining us. I've enjoyed hearing what Mike and Chris and Dee shared with you today, and I hope it's been beneficial. To talk a little bit about clinical now on our clinical corner, my name is Holly Musselwhite. I am a nurse and somewhat do a bit of education and love to reach out and connect with nurses from across the world and learn more about what are similar and different things in their work environments and their roles, and share what may be similar and different here. So today we're going to talk about something that often surprises people, which is giving narcotics in the US. And I want to give you some tips to help sort of ease that transition a little bit. So when we talk about using narcotics, probably one of the most popular ones is morphine. Also hydromorphone, which here is also known as Dilaudid. And it's common in the hospital setting to see those two medications used with probably a significantly increased amount or frequency. I won't say dose, but the frequency with which these medications may be used may be very different from what you see in a similar environment where you currently work. So I hear a lot of nurses that say they give petadine. We don't use petadine routinely here, and it is called another name when it's here. So that's interesting. And there are also some non-narcotic pain relievers that are often used more frequently overseas than they are here. So nurses get a little surprised when they see how often some of these narcotics are used and some of the processes that are required to give them safely here to avoid medication errors, to avoid patients getting too much medication, or us not catching the side effects of those medications fast enough. So a few things. Number one, always use the medication rights. We learn those in nursing school and they haven't gone away. But if you're not really focused on making sure that you're giving it to the right patient, that it's the right drug, that it's the right dose, time, route, and right documentation, any of those things can lead to errors, which risk patient safety. The other thing we need to plan on is teaching our patient about the medication. So if we don't know the medication well enough, we can't teach patients. That means we need to understand the medication before we give it. And that's not just for narcotics, that's for everything. Do we know the onset? How quickly is it going to work? When is it going to reach its peak effectiveness? How long is it going to stay in the patient's system? What are the side effects? What are the adverse effects? So that we know what to monitor for and how soon we might start to see some of those things, and we can manage them. Narcotics in particular cause a lot of patients to have constipation. That's not a fun thing to deal with on top of all the other symptoms that they may be trying to deal with. If they're a post-op patient, post-op pain, and they're getting narcotics and they have constipation on top of everything else, they're going to be really uncomfortable. So we may be administering those medications at the same time, encouraging increased fluid intake, mobility is going to be really important. And so we're balancing a lot on behalf of that patient. Some other things we want to do is nurses have to go in and reassess how that pain responded to that medication and whether the patient is a lot more comfortable and may be able to be more functional, or they're still very uncomfortable, in which case you need to figure out, usually with the help of the prescribing physician, what else can we do to help this patient? That may be based on what type of pain they're having. So we know that if it's neurologic pain, nerve-associated pain, narcotics will not really take care of that as well as some other classes of medications will. We also shouldn't assume that if something is stocked in a machine ready for us to receive, that it is the right thing. So there are humans stocking those machines. We are the last stop before something is taken into the patient's system. And so we have a responsibility to make sure it is the right drug and that we verified that. If you have to count medication because it's a narcotic, you need to make sure that it's an accurate count before you proceed. And if it's not, follow the procedure to get that addressed. Drug diversion, unfortunately, is a reality. And so when you think about why am I counting this? Why is it so important? If it's one pill off, maybe somebody just, oops, it's a big deal. And we have to make sure we follow up to reconcile. If you have to waste medication, maybe you have to give half of a tablet or you have to give half of a vial. How you do that is going to be part of a policy and procedure for the hospital. You have to waste it in the right location. You have to have a witness for narcotics. So you can't just say, I snapped half a tablet and I put it in the correct container and I wasted. There has to be a witness, somebody who's co-signed with you, another RN. and maybe an LPN, depending on where you work, but that has to be followed every single time. And you also have to do that within the time allowed. So if you're preparing a medication, it's best to waste whatever you're going to have to by the order immediately. If a patient says to you, well, stop giving this to me, and you've already given them half of the dose, then what you waste has to be wasted usually within an hour of that happening. So make sure that, you're very timely with that. Hopefully these tips kind of give you some ideas. We are going to have a future Lafora talk show where we talk in more depth about how this works and a little more nuance. So I hope you'll tune in for that. In the coming weeks, you'll see that information come out on that next show. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your week and weekend. And that's all for the Clinical Corner today.
Thanks, Holly. We love the Clinical Corner. I know that everybody on gets so much great information. Patricia said, much appreciated. So thank you so much. And another thing that you can do while we are in retrogression is take that time to research, just like what Holly said. Different narcotics have different names here. So this is a really good opportunity to educate yourself before you ever arrive, and you'll be one step ahead. So, there are many, many things that you can do to keep you moving in the right direction. So before we move on to our upcoming shows, I do want to address a couple of questions that have come in the chat. So Edith, you've said here that you've waited for quite some time to get an invitation for interviews. Are there any job opportunities? Yes, there are. So what I would say to you is take this opportunity, pull out your resume, make sure that it is highlighting your skills, right? So do you have front and center that maybe you have a BSN? Do you work with an EMR, for example? What certifications do you have? So right now, our clients are looking for that strong experience, and we can help you make sure that we highlight that experience that you have, because maybe it's not coming out in your resume or your application. So Edith, I would encourage you to do that. Your case manager or your recruiter can absolutely help you in looking at that resume and seeing if there's opportunity there. So hopefully that helps. But if that's not the case, then please reach out to your recruiter and see where your case is. So let's move on to what is coming up next. So if we can pull up our upcoming shows, we can walk through those. So August 30th, which is in 2 weeks, we are going to have our next Onwards and Upwards, and that is going to focus on retrogression heroes, right? So you will get to meet and hear from nurses just like yourself who have experienced retrogression and are now here in the United States. And what did they do to keep themselves motivated? What did they do to keep themselves on their path? Holly talked about Lafora Talk Show coming up on August 20th. So that is going to be centered around clinical decision-making in the US. So make sure you are marking your calendars for August 30th and August 20th. And just like we said when we had Mike and Chris on, we are, of course, waiting for that October Visa Bulletin. As soon as it is released, then we will have another immigration Q&A the day after, so that we can address those questions from you as well. So as you know, we have a number of shows as well that we highlight on our AMN Academy. So if we can pull up our upcoming shows on AMN Academy. So just like every first Monday, we've got our NCLEX preparation class. And then third Monday, we've got Aspire RN with Nurse Paul. And then, of course, we've got our English preparation. Second Monday with our Niner partners, and of course on the fourth Monday as well. But I do want to let you know that it's not on the slide here, but we have got a very special exclusive interview event, and it is, our team is amazing. They just, I let them know about this just this morning. So we have got an exclusive interview event for one of our esteemed partners Mercy Health System in Missouri. This interview event is going to be focused on our South Campus, and we did a show with our Mercy partners about 2 weeks ago. So where we were joined by the hiring leaders. And so go back and take a look at that if you were not able to join. But this is, again, an exclusive event. It is on August 22nd, where our team of recruiters will be interviewing exclusively for the Mercy South Campus. And it is an amazing opportunity to be placed at a phenomenal health system in the beautiful state of Missouri. So if you did not have a chance to view that show a couple of weeks ago, then please make sure that you are getting your place in line today. If you have not submitted your application, put it in today, amnhealthcare.com/international, and slots are extremely limited for this event. So we want to make sure that if you are interested in speaking with the hiring leaders at Mercy South Campus, then please make sure that you are scheduling your spot. Our recruiters are on hand to get you scheduled. It is a staffing opportunity, so just be aware of that. But it is a great opportunity to get your I-140 filed immediately. If you are offered an opportunity with Mercy South, you can have your I-140 filed within 30 days of that. So please make sure that you are getting your place in line here. We are excited to talk more about Mercy South and give you all the information that you need. So we've got a couple of more questions that are coming in, and we've got a couple of minutes. So I do want to answer them. What specialty are they looking for at Mercy? So that's a great question, Emer Bell. So thank you for asking. You're a cardiac PICU nurse with NCLEX. So even if there aren't cardiac PICU opportunities available in the Mercy Health System, then we certainly do want to help you with that. So please get your application into us today. Congratulations on passing your NCLEX, and we look forward to assisting you. So again, get your application in amnhealthcare.com/international. The handle is going to come up here again. I'm sure you're all very aware of what that looks like right now, but please get your application in and get your place in line for those Mercy interviews that are happening on August 22nd, and they begin at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time all the way through noon Eastern Standard Time. So again, slots are limited, so please make sure if you are interested, then you are securing your spot very, very quickly. So Emer Bell, you're listening from Dublin, Ireland. So you can probably tell, or maybe not, from my accent, I was born and raised in Ireland. So immigrated here quite some time ago. So I know exactly sometimes how challenging it can be in this immigration process. So that is why it really, really is great to have a partner like AMN Healthcare International to help guide you through many of the challenges. So welcome, Emer Bell. Thank you so much for listening in. And I think that's all the questions that we had. So again, I apologize if we did not get to your question with Chris and Mike today, but we will have them on again in the next few weeks as we patiently await the October Visa Bulletin. So if there's one thing that I will leave you with is please make sure that you are controlling what you can control right now. Stay positive, stay motivated, and remember, dream big, dream smart, and choose AMN Healthcare International. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you soon.